with the upcoming anticipated film, Nolan's new latest one, Oppenheimer, we decided to come back and watch his first full feature debut film. This is the first time Kyle's ever seen it.
Yeah, this is the only Nolan film I've ever avoided. Not really actively avoided, but it's just one of those movies, and ironically enough, you could squeeze 2 followings into just about any of his other films as far as runtime goes.
Right. So, of course, we're going to talk about Nolan's first full feature film. Came out in 1998, perfect timing as well. This is Following.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm following you. All right.
Follow me online.
Literally followed you after that.
Follow
All right.
us.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can help the show by hitting like or subscribe and telling your friends about it. Heck yeah, we have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals and great content as well. And an opportunity to tell us what movies we can review in the future. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critics reviews as well as ours. Also, check out Kyle's webpage.
GoatFilmReviews.com. Join up.
Yeah, for reviews of new releases as well as old. And today we're talking about, since Oppenheimer's coming up in a few weeks, we're going to talk about Christopher Nolan's first film, Following.
All right. The film concerns a young writer suffering from an absence of creative flow. He begins following people to ignite his creative spark, and then he finds that he can't really stop. His situation further complicates when someone he's tailing, a thief who steals to teach his victims the value of life, reveals that he knows he's being followed.
Okay, this movie was released in 1998 in the UK. Access and me being able to get a copy of it to watch probably didn't happen till the summer. I know it didn't happen till the summer 2001 because it went through so many film festival circuits and very hard to get distribution and get it overseas. And that's the way things were in the early 2000s. Access to movies like this took years to get into distribution to see. This movie came out, I think Memento came out just quickly right after this. I think the whole point was he's making Memento.
Yeah.
And then,
I think that's the only reason The Following actually made it anywhere, because it's not really a movie you can sell. Like, let's be honest, it's an hour and 9 minutes, which, we've had movies in previous decades, especially black and white movies. I often tell people that one of my favorite horror films, The Wolfman, is 62 minutes. So you can have a shorter movie, but can you get an audience into a theater for a shorter movie, especially a black and white shorter movie, especially one that looks pretty cheap? Let's be honest, it's a micro budget. I think it costs like $4,000. So
yeah, available right now on Tubi if you can catch it. You can look on YouTube for the trailer.
The Criterion edition is also really, really good. It's actually the only Christopher Nolan film on Criterion, but the transfer is quite good for that version of the film.
So I'm going to say his name a lot of times because it's directed by Christopher Nolan, screenplay by Christopher Nolan, cinematography Christopher Nolan, and
co-edited by Christopher Nolan.
Co-edited by Christopher Nolan. He's the one operating the camera, even the handheld shots he is doing. He was in his mid-20s when he made this movie. And of course, very much, I think the accolades I saw on the internet, very much like David Cronenberg. Even in David Cronenberg's early films, you see the DNA of David Cronenberg films.
Yeah. In
this movie, you see the DNA of Christopher Nolan films that we will see in the future, other movies that we've seen.
Yeah, he's actually he's a skilled director, but more than anything, he's a lucky director in that he has now gotten to the point where he can get Marvel budgets to do his movies. Yeah. Because most directors can't get it based on name. But he can. He can now make a movie that's got a $200 million budget.
That's why he took on Batman as a vessel to get that.
But he's doing things like releasing Tenet in theaters during a pandemic. Like, he's got the ability to do that, which is so weird when you think about this movie. And I just looked down. It's $6,000 was how much this movie cost to make. $6,000. And yet he went to the point where now he's making a 3-hour-long Oppenheimer biopic. Like, it's just crazy, the trajectory.
Now, when I read to this, it seemed boring. Just a bunch of people who were obsessed with just following characters of other people and breaking into their homes, and it didn't convey me an interesting plot. I don't think they want to give too much away of the story, but what they did was so bland that I think I watched the first 30 minutes of this movie, and I'm just like, I can't take it. It's so slow for me. But I was like, all right, it's one of those, I rented it, I put the money down, I'm going to go to the end, and it paid off for me. because I don't think they knew how to market this movie, or I don't think anybody really watched this movie that distributed it.
Yeah,
Because
and like I said, it's not really a commercial film.
Right.
You know, it's an arty movie. Like, we have to be honest, it has less arty themes than, say, like an Eraserhead or one of Cronenberg's early films, but it's an arty movie made on a shoestring budget, and that is really hard to find anyone to do it. The only connection someone could maybe make from a marketing standpoint is that it's non-linear plotting, so they could be like, hey, it's another Pulp Fiction, you know, or something like that.
But I had the very much inkling, because it was a black and white, very cheap and very murky, that it probably could have been like a Darren Aronofsky's Pie.
Yeah.
I got that kind of vibe.
Okay.
But, you know, he works very surreal, which is not a minus, but just I thought it was going to be one of those movies.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's a Christopher Nolan brand before we knew what a brand was.
Well, there's no performers in it that are known. I think, honestly, the most well-known performer in the movie, and that's with decades added onto it, is John Nolan, who's just the director's uncle. You know, who's been in Dunkirk and a couple of Batman movies. But, like, he's the most well-known actor in the whole group. He's barely in the movie, and he's only there because he's got his nephew making it.
So Nolan goes on location. This is not built-in set. He goes into certain bars. There's very much very similar to Memento. There's a bar scene, very unique bar scene that even though it's shot during the night, we know we're at that location. Yep. There is kind of the mix-up of editing that makes it a little incoherent, but we understand as we go along what is transpiring. And, of course, a lot of Nolan's movies, there's a lot of deceivement of who's playing who, very much like a David Mamet script. But through the editing process, because all of a sudden we were following this person, he's in an interrogation room at the beginning of the movie, we're like, okay, he's in trouble. And then we're going to go back to why he's in trouble.
Yeah, it's probably it's like all those movies that start with, you're probably wondering how I ended up here. You know?
Right. Without saying that in a noir movie, you would say that in your internal
he's
dialogue.
Like floating in the pool dead with a gunshot.
Yeah, very much like Sunset Boulevard. How do I end up dead in the pool? Well, you know.
Yep.
But yeah, I would. People have labeled this a neo-noir. I'm not going to fight you with it. I understand this. The condemnation element is very gritty on set. Yeah,
I would argue that ends up being the case for it purely because of its black and white nature, and because we have characters that don't have names,
and
really.
And the people that are. These are people that never get out of it alive.
Yeah. I don't really see that angle, but I mean, like, I respect people's take on it, but it's not how I view the film at all.
No. Out of the Furnace is a neo-noir. That is gritty, dirty. You know.
Yeah, this is very much. I see more influences by, like, Hitchcock kind of things here, where there are elements of characters doing things that are dirty, things that are wrong, but they enjoy it. It's kind of like the Rear Window thing of, you shouldn't be watching the people across your balcony, but you are, and you're having fun doing it. You're getting off on that. That's what's happening here.
When I get my review, I'll get another emphasis of Hitchcock and why I can relate it. I want to relate it to this movie. So yeah, when you do low budget, you're going to have to do a lot of handheld camera. And if you're doing bare bones crew, and you know camera, you're going to have to find somebody that's really talented with sound. I'm surprised sound technically is pretty good. Remember Kubrick's film, his first movie, the sound sucked.
Yeah, I mean,
he worked so much on camera.
This is a case where the sound is not going to win in the awards, but it's certainly a lot less awful. Like, because you expect it. When you see the grittiness of what's on display film-wise, you're expecting to have your eardrums blown out.
So I want to talk about that, because if you're interested in making your own movie and you want to make it a shoestring budget, and you know camera and you know cinematography, don't skip out on sound. It's the worst thing ever. People can't tolerate bad sound. Yeah. They can tolerate bad framing of a movie, bad lighting, whatever.
Bad acting.
Bad acting. They can tolerate a lot of that. They can tolerate everything except for if the sound is bad. We know because we record this episode a lot with bad sound, and we know that it's not going to work very well. But I just want to emphasize, if you're interested in making a movie, just be like Nolan was a movie. Don't skip out on sound.
Yeah. Well, and I think... Yeah, I watched this movie, actually. It was on my big screen TV, but I did have my earbuds in because I was trying to be quiet around a bunch of people that were sleeping in my home. So I had those earbuds in, and I was just like, God, this is going to hurt. And I played it, I was like, oh, it's not bad.
It's not bad.
Okay.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
You know, there's issues with a number of other technical things in the film. But I think that also comes with the fact that, you know, if you don't know, like, I've made movies like this before, but Nolan got about 15 minutes of footage every weekend for a year, because every person working on this movie had a 40-hour week day job. So it would be on the weekends.
Well, no wonder they look miserable.
Yeah, and that's why you can honestly tell a little bit, I think, with Jeremy Theobald, I think, is that he he does look like he's got a different look slightly throughout the film, and I think that actually is why they put in the haircut scene.
Yeah.
Is I actually think that was done because they were like, oh shit, he shaved his hair. Like, what do we do? So I think they had to
Cover
make
up
some
the
adjustments.
lighting a little
Yeah.
bit. Right. Yeah. So, like I said, this has Nolan's DNA all over this. I think that he has a brand that he's established. But like I said, with Cronenberg, you're going to get a Cronenberg film whether you like it or not, no matter what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the case of this one, because of the change in budgets, it's less of a fluid DNA that's always been with him and more of an evolving situation.
Yep.
Because I do think if you watch this movie and then you go watch something like Tenet that just came out, or if you go see Oppenheimer, I don't think you're going to see as much DNA between those films, but you'll see a DNA between this one and Memento, and then Memento and Insomnia, and then Insomnia, and then and like you could follow through each one of those films and see connections. But I think if you take point A and point Z and put them together, I think you can see some drastically different things. And I think that's because I don't think this is Nolan's best film by a long margin, but you can see the potential and you can see what he learns and gets better. He's a director that does learn from his own mistakes, except when it comes to sound in his new movies.
All right. We talked a little bit of kind of reviewing of it, but up next is our review of Following. This is interesting that this is on Criterion, but not Memento. And I know a lot of film classes are actually requiring people to watch Memento now.
I saw Memento in a film class. That was the first time I saw that movie. So.
Oh my God.
But Criterion, I think that the case is it's probably cheaper to get the rights to. No one else is asking for Following. And it's also probably a movie that you can't find, like without streaming, you couldn't have found this thing probably without the Criterion disc. Yeah. It would have been very hard to find. So I think they probably did a service to him in getting this film out, because I do think it probably would have disappeared into the ether. Much like it was hard for us to find Murder a la Mode for Brian De Palma, and we finally found a streaming version of it. Like, those early films, they don't survive,
What really pays off for this movie, and it's very low budget, you're right, it's not going to win a bunch of accolades, but what really is effective to me is how he uses framing of ordinary things to make it look abstract. So memorable. I will remember, after the scene in this movie, I know the interrogation scene. This is the way he shot it, the angles of the intense anxiety, but also the doors to the bar are very unique, and he almost shoots this, looked like abstract. When he goes in the barn to steal the money, all the lights are off, and it looks like you're going to this an Alfred Hitchcock, like this surreal, dreamlike area with all the lights off and very abstractly. Not to mention, this is actually supposed to take place in like a real environmental setting. But that's kind of what I think you got a lot of lift from Alfred Hitchcock doing that. With his, you get in your surreal little bit of vertigo, but you go back into the movie reality.
Yeah. He does set it. He sets a tone with the film, and I think you said it right, movie reality. Because if you look at this in the confines of a realistic story, I don't buy.
You're gonna get arrested.
Well, yeah. I don't buy anything that happens in the movie from a realistic point of view. But I think in starting and peeling back the layers at the right time periods, I think this has one of the best, even though it's a fairly common, one of the best interpretations of the stalker trope. Because the idea, we were taught this in our creative writing classes when I was in college, is not following people, but like sitting out in the open and listening to people, hearing the conversations, taking in what they do, how they act, how they are. Yeah. That's how you mold characters, is by witnessing real events. And I think I buy that this guy would be like following people to figure them out. Yeah. And I buy that he would get off on it a little bit, and he would actually like find that he's kind of stuck in his place. And so right at that moment where you're about to lose that, he peels a layer back, and one of the guys he's following realizes it. And I think that adds a layer. Then we add a little bit more, and like I don't buy where the film ends up, but I really buy the opening and how it sets up its piece. I don't think the film stands on its own near the end, but
I liked how he arranged it because it's a craftsmanship. Right. We know it's a Nolan movie. We know there's something entangled at the end and the way through the editing through it. But you have, and of course it's centered on the femme fatales, kind of or the crux, something happened. Usually in Nolan movies, that's kind of his weakness is female writing and how to develop female characters. But
yeah, or forgetting that they're in the movie.
Forgetting they're in the movie. It just seems like
that's the case here a little bit.
Right. Tenet was all a woman in distress, and he needs to work on not doing that all the time.
Yeah, and what's too bad is that he does have these problems with writing female characters. Thankfully, he has really great female actresses, especially later on in his films, that can do the heavy lifting for him, where it's almost like you don't realize that they're not as written as well. But man, if he could really write a great female character, and you get someone like what was her name, Debicki, who was in Tenet playing the female, like, you could really do something special. She can really carry a performance. Yeah. And I think that's the thing is here is Lucy Russell's doing a pretty good job, but I don't think there's anything for her, and I think she's ultimately forgotten in kind of hitting the beats of the film that he's trying to end off with. That's what's so disappointing to me, is that the setup is so great, and I don't think the payoff is really all that good because it's kind of standard.
The interesting point is how he made this film, because all the the shot list and how you arrange this and everything, an amateur person would have do this kind of clunky. What really paid off for me to understand that he knows exactly what he's doing, even with the small budget, is the cafe scene, where he's handheld camera and he's following the guy that's stalking. They go in the cafe, and through the whole gesture, I know it's him holding the camera, but he makes it everything so smooth that even when he sits down and sits the frame, I go, that's perfect. That is perfect. That's somebody that knows craftsmanship of how to set up a movie shot. It sold me right there, as well as the bank robbing scene, because there's no lighting. Like, you could ruin that movie entirely because it'd be clunky or you're doing something, but it's such a smooth and abstract part of the movie that is probably the most memorable thing about the movie.
Yeah, because the film came out in America, at least so close to Memento, I think people view them as being so closely
associated.
Right. And I think the thing about it is that this is a movie that you can see the first-time director of it all, but it's not that bad when you consider everything he's working with. And I think there's two schools of thoughts here. One is you write a screenplay as best as you can, and then you realize what you need to cut. Yeah. And he came at it, I think, from another point of view, which is, here's what I have. What can I make with it? Because he had some friends that were probably willing to be in his movie. He had all the equipment that he was going to use on his own, but he knew he couldn't have explosions or CGI monsters or anything like that. So it's like, what do you put into your film? What do you have to use?
Hey, my best friend Joe, can we film in your apartment? Yeah, why
exactly.
not?
Yeah. I think the last feature I worked on, my entire home was in that film. Every room that I lived in was in that movie, and it's something where it kind of got a little personal, where I had pictures of myself that were in shots that weren't supposed to be and stuff. So
you can get away with filming out in the street if you do it pretty close.
Yep.
So nobody's going to come in and ruin your shot.
And if you're using a handheld camera, you're less likely to be stopped by the police for a filmmaking permit or anything like that. You can just have your handheld camera outside and you're just filming two people talking.
Right. I mean, they build them now, and they just can stand here, and 90% of the people walk with their head down. They're not going to pay attention.
Yeah, my friend who's a DP, he's just got a little shoulder stand. It's got a little cushion on it, and he just stands like that and captures it. And I think I remember when we were doing some guerrilla filmmaking back in college, it was a thing where, like, when you'd see a cop car go up, it's like, oh, we're going to run this take real quick. We're just going to put that down, and we're going to put it right back up. Let's go. Yeah. You just keep going.
So it's very effective. Like I said, it's great to see that it's not just by accident, his success. He knew exactly what he was doing with a small budget. And another thing about a great director knows how to get the best out of what you can have, rather than forcing something to happen. Great directors know how to get something made. There's a great scene of Spielberg setting up a complex shot on set for Jurassic Park, and he does it in 2 seconds because nobody's like, how are we going to do this blocking? And it's on Twitter. You can see 5 minutes of him going, we need to do this and this and this. And he's not forcing everything. This is what's in the movie, and this is what we need to shoot. And that's why he's a great director.
Yeah. I think it's, okay, sir, I love this quote. Someone had asked Kevin Feige, who's, big Marvel boy. Someone asked Kevin Feige why he was picking small directors, like indie directors, to helm these massive $200 million films. And his answer was always, I'm probably misquoting it, but it was, a good director is a good director. A good storyteller is a good storyteller. I think that's 98% true. There are some people who can only work in one part of the medium, but I think most good storytellers can figure it out. And that's why you can see that he knows what he's doing on a $6,000 budget. He knows what he's doing on a $200 million budget. He's capable of covering it all. Now, granted, I'm not going to suggest that he make another $6,000 film, because I do think there's some clumsiness in just with what comes with what you have to do as a $6,000 film. It's something that's out of your hands when you get to a certain level, and I think that's the case here. But what he's able to do with that price is phenomenal.
And I always said a good film is unforgettable or memorable, and he worked, and for me, unforgettable. There's certain things about this movie I will not forget I've seen. No matter how hard you try.
I think primarily that opening set piece of him basically following people, of him doing the stalker thing and his reasoning behind it and the way that he comes to terms with it, I think is really well crafted. Stays with me. I do think that the last half is going to be forgettable to me, but I think that opening half is really strong. And the kind of things that Alex Ha's character, Cobb, who we would see another variation of later on in Inception, Alex Ha's character and his realization of like, well, I steal from people to teach them a lesson about life.
Yeah.
He's basically like a theft version of Saw.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of things early on in the film.
I need to force myself on you to be your hero. You just don't know it yet. That kind of villainy. Right. I'm doing you a favor by stealing from you. You should know. It's almost like a hacker. I'm hacking you to show you how easy it is to get into your computer, and you should respect me for hacking into you and show you what you need to work on.
Yeah, but I think if you know what you have at your disposal to make your films, you can do something great. I oftentimes reference one of my favorite Ingmar Bergman films is a movie called After the Rehearsal, and I kid you not, there are two people on a stage, a play stage in a theater, and they talk for about 85 minutes, and then the movie ends. It's one of my favorite Ingmar Bergman films, and it's two people talking on a stage. So if you have a story that you can tell with limited people, limited resources, limited sets, go find a way to make it, because I think you can do something cool with it. And I think that's what it's an inspiring account. Following is, you know, when you see that he's got 5 people and he did the entire filmmaking process himself, it inspires me to go make friends that I'm not going to be able to pay.
Yeah, but you understand, I think you have to sit down and what we're going to do. I'm going to have to do handheld for this location. I'm going to have to do still for this location. It's going to be on location for this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, if you're going to make a $6,000 movie, meticulously plan.
Plan your shot list. Plan your shot list and you get a script supervisor to account what's going to transpire.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody's got a filmmaking plan until you get punched in the mouth. But I think if you put forth your plan and you have it in place, that way when you get those hits, when you get those random problems, you can curve with it, even if it ends up being 15 minutes of footage every weekend for a year.
But somebody saw something to give him enough money to do his next movie. It's all exactly what I see. There's interesting elements that if somebody seriously knows how to make movies.
Yeah, because Following is probably, along with Insomnia, are 2 Christopher Nolan films I'm probably not going to go back to. But in the case of Following, I respect what's being put here. It's just not a movie that's going to drive me to his work the way a lot of his others will. Yeah. But I think if you're a fan of Nolan and you want to see where he came from, that's what you can do. Yeah.
I am running to the theater when his movies come out.
That's true. Yeah.
And I'll be a defender of Tenet. I mean, obviously, it's not for everything. It's very flawed, but he's taking a big bat and trying to swing it out of the park every time. And sometimes you're just going to get a fly ball.
Yeah. I hope that with something like Oppenheimer that he's able to figure out how to do sound, because he did it in Following. But it seems like nowadays he can't put dialogue in his movies because the sound is too dang all over the place. And that was the problem of Tenet, I felt, was that I liked Tenet quite a bit. I would say really liked Tenet. But I watched it at home with my subtitles on. And I really enjoyed the movie. But it seems like everybody who saw Tenet in theaters was like, I didn't know what the hell was going on the whole time. So, Chris, look back at Following. You were able to get good sound back then on a shoestring. You can do it.
All right. Keep the conversation going. What do you think of Following? Have you seen it? What other Christopher Nolan films should we do?
I can't believe we haven't covered any other. Have we not covered any other Christopher Nolan?
My personal favorite is, of course, I like Dark Knight, but outside of the Batman trilogy, Prestige.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do Prestige sooner or later because it's one of my absolute favorite movies.
Because what the hell is it? Sci-fi? Is it?
I mean,
horror movie?
I've watched it maybe 500 times.
Psychological thriller. What category would you put that in the video rental?
Yeah, so let us know down in the comment section your favorite Christopher Nolan film and maybe which one you'd like us to cover in a future episode. Because honestly, it's crazy that we haven't covered him, but we are going to have to sooner or later probably go through the entire filmography because there's not that many movies. So let us know in the comments what you thought about the film Following. And again, you can stream it on Tubi for free right now if you go over there. So thank you guys for joining us. You can find all of my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my show, The St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And don't follow me.